Karl Marx says that he's tired by the time that he's almost 30. He didn't have to live through the Trump era. The Young Karl Marx is a movie about Karl Marx the way we've never seen him photographed. We only see him photographed as, like, an old guy, right? Here's the ones where he's like... with the beard. Like, the beard boys, right? Young Karl Marx shows him with a more tamed beard, a wife, young children, and a Jufro. Am I allowed to say Jufro? They just put... So the movie's really interesting because it depicts Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels as people with flaws and how the society reacted to them. Karl Marx finds friendship, and it's ultimately about how the Communist Manifesto is written. If you want to place this movie in world history, think about Hamilton, which starts right before the US Revolution, about halfway point, finishes the US Revolution, then the French Revolution is started, off screen. The Young Karl Marx is a period piece, and like all period pieces, makes the past seem cramped and gross. That is an observation from my partner and not from me. Full credit to them. The movie focuses on themes of poverty, showing the poverty of workers and also the poverty of Marx, who tries to support a family based off of a writing career and a political activist career in a movement that doesn't accept him. And it also shows how a lot of worker justice movements used pretty sounds and vague terms for freedom and equality and all men are brothers. And Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels come in and say, no, we have enemies in order to fight and change things. I found the whole movie to be entertaining and educational and inciting, but also a bit depressing, because we still have a lot of the same problems that Marx and Engels are dealing with.
Schreibt vage Literaturkritiken und vage Resümees über vage politische Doktrinen.
Sofort zurück! Ich hab genug von deiner Arroganz. Alle haben wir genug!
Ja. Ja, ich habe auch ein bisschen genug von dir, Bauer. Und von euch ganzen Junghegelianern und Freigeistern, wie ihr euch beifallsheischend nennt. Amüsiert euch nur weiter, ihr Clowns. Karl! Nein! Ruge! Ich habe genug mit Nadelstichen zu kämpfen. Ich will endlich mit Keulenschlägen kämpfen. Ich habe genug von der Heuchelei, Dummheit und der brutalen Autorität. Wir sind verboten. Gut so.
Karl, was machst du?
Ein paar Nächte hinter Gittern wird uns allen ganz gut tun. Meine Herren, wer soweit?
It reminded me of the thought of the end of history. We've already done, invented, written, painted everything that there is to write and paint, and now we are just rehashing the past. We are done making history. The events of young Karl Marx are nearly 200 years ago, and we're still working off the same framework of capitalists and workers, and trying to seize the means of production. Only less so, because we haven't seized the means of production. We still haven't gotten that step. So it feels like we've been spinning our wheels for 200 years. Sure, we've gotten rid of monarchies, but not the hierarchies that are placed in the workplace. There are still stupidly rich people exploiting and getting money off of the majority of America to be some of the richest people in the world, while the majority of the country has so little. The top 1% rich people have more money than the bottom 50% of people. And it feels like we've almost taken it kind of feels like we've taken a step backwards, because we don't have communists anymore. Especially in America, when they were all murdered in the 50s. It feels like we don't have people gathering together to make it better for workers. Though I do feel like those movements are gaining leverage now, especially with Bernie Sanders and people being willing to call themselves democratic socialists and socialists. They are springing back up. Several of the things that communists and socialists strive to do, like help unions and start unions, have felt like they've lost power over time as government has more and more anti-union laws. And as unions, such as, let's call it Whirlpool, are less than stellar at doing their job of protecting workers and more just policing their workers or not caring about their workers for the company. I do appreciate the lasting efforts of socialists of the past in even creating unions, that unions still stand today and still fight for certain inequalities as we move forward and expand our definitions of the impoverished and vulnerable people. But the fight against unions is so bad. Like, they outright murdered and jailed and imprisoned socialists in the 50s. I grew up thinking that socialism was a dirty word, and unions were also a dirty word in my household. But a lot of this could be me projecting. I think that people are less willing to fight, but in fact maybe I'm less willing to fight, or maybe I was never willing to fight, even considering my upbringing.
I have come here to set out principles on which we plan to base the coming struggles. For not to delude ourselves, these struggles will be extremely violent.
Enough violence. What we demand, what mankind demands, is kindness. Fraternity, what this world lacks and needs more than our bodies need fresh water, is gentleness, a kind of ardent fraternity.
There are probably some people here who weep when they hear the words kindness, gentleness, fraternity. But tears do not give power. Power does not shed tears. The bourgeoisie shows you no gentleness, and you won't conquer it with kindness. Citizens, friends, comrades, why are we here? Because we are fighting.
Yes, of course.
Yes!
And what are we fighting for?
Freedom!
Equality.
All men are brothers!
All men are brothers. Yes. All men are brothers. Are they? You? Yes. And you?
Yes, of course.
What about you? Me? All of them today? Yes. The bourgeois and the workers, are they brothers? No, they are not. They are enemies. We need to know what we have gathered here for. Is it for an abstract idea? A sentimental daydream? How far will that get us, do you think? We need to know what the League wants, what it's fighting for what society. And we have to decide that now.
Why now?
We know who you represent. Marx is here, skulking in the crowd after firing his darts. Long live Weitling!
Long live Proudhon!
No, I'm here. I'm not skulking. You are shouting, long live Proudhon and long live Weitling. But what is the point?
Shut him up! We already heard you!
Proudhon doesn't leave France. He has no voice. And Weitling has given up. So you're cheering for shadows. All of you.
I have here the book Marx is referring to. His answer to Proudhon. He asks the fundamental question, the question that sums up our struggle. Karl,
Go on. You have the floor.
the antagonism between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie can only lead to a complete revolution as long as classes exist. The last word of social science will always be, as Georges Sand said, the struggle or death, the bloody fight or nothingness.
Long live George Sand!
Long live Marx.
Let those who refuse to fight stand up and say so.
Industrial revolution has created the modern slave. This slave is the proletariat. And by freeing itself, it will free the whole of mankind. And that freedom has a name.
It took decades, but child labor ended. And it took decades more, but slavery was ended. And civil rights were founded. But I didn't have to fight for any of those things. Those things happened vaguely in the past. And as far as I was concerned, not even recently. And I could almost forget about them. And that was a mistake. because we're connected to the past. We still live the repercussions of past movements. When I say I feel like socialism has taken a step back, that's because in my mind I've disconnected it from the movements of feminism and civil rights, which have been very active in the last 50 years, and feminism especially in the last 20 years. Even if the fight hasn't been for socialism in the last decade, we've worked on other problems. And I worry that in that time, well, I know that in that time, capital has taken itself to seed in these other sides of the movements and tried to place itself as not part of the problem. Capitalism works off power imbalances and dividing people. It divides them by gender, by ethnicity, and by who has how much money. And it's able to profit off of those divisions. It sells different things to poor people than it does to rich people. Through the guise of rugged individualism and also not having trained employees, retail, which is one of the biggest employers in the country, has churned through the lower class, paying people less and less and trying to make them think that they can ask for more, that they're just in a stepping stone in their job. Stopping at all costs people from unionizing in order to get a good living wage. And these efforts are stopped at all levels of government. These levels are stopped nationally, at the state level, and at the local level. And everyone is as disconnected as possible so they feel like they can't do anything to change the system. And that is how I feel. All the time. Disconnected in my apartment. And I'm jealous of the movements that I see in the young Karl Marx, because there are people bringing out new theories, arguing with each other, posting books, deciding whether or not we should be friends, where should we draw lines, how should we treat one another, and how exactly we work together. And I feel like that isn't in the movement because we're so focused on other things. We're not focused on taking out capital. I myself am worried because those critiques are old and outdated. Capital is 5 volumes by Karl Marx talking about how capitalism works. And it's that long because capitalism is changing along with the times in order to hide itself, in order to become more embedded in human nature and culture. Capitalism isn't even as old as our country. Last year, was it even 2 years ago? The Panama Papers came out, and that pretty much told that hundreds of the wealthiest people are hiding their money in offshore accounts so they don't have to be taxed. In Davos, a weird retreat for rich people where a bunch of billionaires think they shouldn't be taxed, there are little committees about how you can start your own charity so that it looks like you're a good person, and then actively hide your money and make it not be taxed, in other words, because of course your money's better used by you. It's better weaseled and embezzled and not taxed so that you can spend all your money on charity instead of letting, the system that people made to fix problems have the money to fix problems. Another thing I liked in the movie is how much Karl Marx was a materialist. He didn't think of things in theory. He put his theory in terms of things we could physically touch and observe and look at. Money is an abstraction of value and labor of people. And the millionaires and billionaires that hoard their money and hide it away are hoarding the exploited labor of people, of society. You can't work for $1 million, but you can take $1 million from the accumulation of workers. And isn't it a bit strange? Isn't it a bit odd that we take the solid form of work and what we've made, the books that we write, the efforts that we take, and then we transition them into money and consider money work, and that money is power, and use those notes to control one another, pump my gas, get me this off the shelf, pick up my groceries. It seems fair the way you use money because you directly worked on it. I know there aren't any billionaires or millionaires watching this now. I'm pretty sure everyone who's watching this worked for their money. And you have a good command of what you've done and then what you can deserve and what you buy off that money. And you might struggle to even maintain your life possibly, as I have before. And there are steep punishments for like overdrawing. punishment saying you don't deserve to have this kind of money, or you have to work this much in order to break even now. Where millionaires and billionaires take the money that's equivalent to the effort of thousands or millions of people in your past, your ancestors, your fathers and grandfathers. They take that money and they spend it on fire festivals. They do whatever they want. They feel like they have the authority and they have the power to decide what happens to the results of that labor that they've piled up, that they've had over years. One of the major arguments against taxing these people more is that they'll leave the country. They'll move their companies. They'll move their factories. They'll stop giving back what was the people's because they don't want to be taxed. My feeling is, why do we have that abstraction then? Why do we have the extraction that these people can steal this much from us and then just leave? Why let our nation have the majority of its value be possible for them to up and leave? They can't take factories away. When they move factories, we still have the buildings in America. We still have the workers sitting around not doing anything. Why not just put them to work? Why not take the factories? Why maintain the abstraction? The workers of the past built the society we live in today. That is the equivalent to their labor. Having roads, having railroads, having airplanes, having technology, building computers. Rich people can't take that away. They can't take away computers. What they can do is take away the abstraction. So when push comes to shove, and the rich people try to abandon our country for places where they can just live off of the nothing, why have the dollar? Why not abandon it? These might be very simplistic thoughts, I know, but the thought that one person can spend the labor of millions of people from the past is a little eugenicsy, thinking that you are so much better and smarter and well qualified to decide what happens to the results of labor than any single worker, or what the workers of the past might have actually wanted, is pretty eugenicsy. So why have money? Why dole out property? Why only give property to the rich people? Why not give everyone a house? Why not make sure everyone's fed and clothed? These thoughts might be overly simple, but they're goals, they're ideas. The arguments for capitalism, that it would be too hard to change it, feel damning when people bring them up to me, of capitalism. We can't raise the minimum wage because then there will be less workers.
Mr. Naylor owns foundries in Leeds. He employs many workers, including children, a harsh necessity. My friend Marx is a journalist. He's researching a topic we are interested in.
About child labor in factories. How many are there in use, actually?
In one factory, about 20 children to 30 men.
Day work, night work?
Not both.
Isn't that a bit exhausting?
Working day or nights has no effect on the health, Friedrich.
Your house.
Beg your pardon?
My wife means it makes no difference to your health, but not the children's.
But we've no choice. You know very well that without child labor, we'd price ourselves out of the market.
Meaning you would have paid a fair price to your workers' labor, right?
But I don't set the prices, young man. The market does.
Of course, yeah.
If I stopped hiring children, others would, and I'd go bankrupt. That's what society does.
No, sir. This is how the existing relations of production work, not society. Society is not you.
Why do there have to be so many poor people? If we wanted to get rid of poverty, we would. We could. Just get rid of it and focus on it. Our economy's goal is to do one thing, and that is to make money. But if we make money so that we can improve society, invent things, make sure people have a good living, make sure people can survive, why not make the goal of economy make sure people survive and have medicine and to grow technology? Having the one goal be make money is terrible and makes everything else a side effect. Now, getting rid of money isn't all I want to change. There's other steps we can do until that point. And getting rid of the money can be the threat that we have in order to keep labor and value in America. And make it taxable. And make it so that billionaires and millionaires have to stay. Giving factories to workers, to the taxpayers. are good middle steps in my opinion. Wisconsin's getting screwed because Foxconn is not bringing the kind of jobs to the factories that they promised they would, and they're still spending $3 billion on them. $3 billion, I think you can figure out a way to build a factory. And if you're part of the government, I think you can find a way to give yourself a contract to build things. Michigan, Ohio, Illinois were also waiting in line for Foxconn and giving them offers to build factories. Why don't you buy a contract, Michigan, and build your own factory? And then you can make sure that thousands of workers have a job. You can even eminent domain some homes and make sure that your poor people and homeless people just have homes. Why have jobs organized by hierarchies? Why have hierarchies at the workplace, where 12 people in a room can decide to close a factory of thousands? Why not have the thousands of people decide if they want to close their factory or not? And then they can hire people to manage, hire people to make decisions, or even take a day off of work and have representatives make decisions for them and make deals and make calls. We decided long ago that hierarchies don't belong in government. We should make the same decisions for our workplace. Hierarchies don't make sense. Living under kings, the sons of millionaires and billionaires, being successful because they're millionaires and billionaires, because they got money from their parents, is dumb. It's as dumb as having a king. There's a question for our mayoral race a few years ago that really stuck in my mind. One of the biggest employers in my town is Rockwell Collins. They employ engineers, workers, factorymen, and work on government contracts. Rockwell Collins was bought by another company and moved the headquarters away from Cedar Rapids. At the time of our election, there was a lot of concern over what we do if this headquarters moves, and what could the mayor do? And there was a bunch of non-answers. Give them benefits, ask them really nicely. None of them had an answer, and none of them have answers. We don't have the power under capitalism to oppose it in our government. Another car factory line closed in Ohio. Or was it Illinois? Jeez. It doesn't matter. They're all over and they're all closing. And there are thousands of workers thinking that they could just make that car. Like, there was even a story on NPR where they look at a line of cars that was made in Mexico, and it's like, oh, those bolts weren't tightened right, or that painting is off, we could have made that car. And no one has the answer of why not take the factory back? Why not make our own car? Why doesn't Ohio just take the factory that's been abandoned by a bunch of rich people that don't want it anymore because they think they can build shit in Mexico? Workers of the world, you can unite. And we can do this on every level. Local, state, national. It's a war that needs to be fought on every level to make these kind of decisions. Because there isn't an answer for what you can do for hundreds of workers that have been fired or displaced. And they can't wait around for long while their towns and cities and suburbs fall into crime and poverty.
You don't say.
I hate and despise gentlemen. They are swine who grow fat on the sweat of laborers.
Thanks for watching. If you want a little more details on how to fight capitalism or why it should end, check out my Quit Capitalism video. Make sure to subscribe. And if you want to support me and help me do this, I have a Patreon. Let's support one another instead of billionaires.